Here we go. Good morning. Once again, since this is in the main room, I feel a need to repeat myself. If you were coming late to this Q&A session and you are here and you're wondering what's happening, we have broken out the session into breakout rooms, into three tutorials. This room is currently being used to talk about theories of change and logic models. If you'd like to look at the other breakout rooms, you can push the little boxes at the bottom of your screen that indicate breakout rooms, and you can choose to go to one of the other sessions in order to sort of go and attend those tutorials. But I'm going to launch into our session now. As just a little a point of information for folks before we get started, I wanted to let you know that we're actually these sessions were deliberately created to be fairly longer. We're going to be together for about 30 minutes. And the reason for that is that I will present some material and some information for you to chew on and start to understand and get the basics of logic models and theories of change. But I'm really hoping that you'll interrupt me, that you'll ask some questions, that you'll bring your own ideas or struggles or what you're puzzling over right now into the room, because this is really supposed to be a Q&A. It is interactive. The materials are here so that folks that are maybe starting on the ground basement floor get started a little bit quickly. But indeed, the session is also supposed to be for you to engage on the issues that you're interested in. So without further ado, I hope everybody will feel comfortable interrupting me if you need to, or by unmiking or raising your hand, and I will go ahead and start into some of the materials. So today we're talking about theories of change and logic models, but to be perfectly honest, before you can start talking about theories of change or logic models, you need to start thinking about the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle of system improvement. There's many models. Some folks have different schematics that show the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle. This is what some people affectionately call the Chapin Hall fish that has the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle of CQI. But before, the reason that we start here is because this is the way that we ensure that we are both using data to inform our understanding of what's wrong with our system and in need of improvement. But then there's a structured process by which we sort of identify those problems, hypothesize as to the cause of those problems, and then begin to dismantle those issues with the use of data. The first part of the PDSA cycle is, of course, plan. And the first part of that is actually problem identification. What is the issue that you are trying to solve? And I'm starting here because this is a slightly unique conversation. I know many of you in this room, and we've talked about your system improvement plans together, and we've worked closely on identifying various problems that you might have in terms of safety or permanency or reentry, many measures that you can look at. And this time, we're really talking very specifically about prevention. And so without sort of being in everybody's minds and uniquely and thinking in specifically to your county context, one of the problems that we have to solve through a prevention lens is why so many young people and children are entering foster care, right? That's the problem. And prevention is how we address that problem, but we kind of need to understand what that problem is. And then we discussed quite a bit in the mid of August that there's these sort of target populations that you're thinking about, right? And we've talked about everything from children that might be disproportionately represented in our child welfare system to children impacted by poverty, families impacted by substance abuse, domestic violence. All these kind of things might be reasons that people are entering foster care, but there's also this sort of, there's the us of the problem, right? There's our systems and the way that the systems have traditionally been set up and that emphasizes foster care. The child welfare systems have historically been about foster care placement and keeping children safe through the use of out-of-home care. But through a prevention lens, we're actually thinking very differently about how to solve those issues and how to help children and families without the need for that sort of heavy-handed intervention. Both of these things come together because we need to think about the problem first, right? Why are children entering foster care? And then we need to sort of hypothesize as to the reasons that that might be the case. And Chapin Hall gives us some good guidance, to keep us sort of really focused on what we have some locus of control around. What is our system doing to these problems? And so this might be the process by which we conduct our work. Is there something about the way that we screen, investigate and bring families into the system? Or maybe it's the quality of care. Maybe there's something in the front end of our system or through the ways that we're trying to do prevention where we could just boost that quality up. Or maybe we need to sort of resource share with our community partners so their quality is boosted up. Or it might just be capacity. Maybe you're really just talking about you don't have enough community partners or you don't have enough prevention sort of avenues open right now that can sort of support and accept the yield that we might be doing in terms of diversion from the foster care system. This is just level setting because the theory of change is something that you're introducing in your comprehensive prevention plan. You're allowed to choose either a theory of change or a logic model. We're going to discuss both and how they both build on each other and work together so that you'll have a better idea of what they are and the components of each. Even though I'm talking about both, it's not to suggest that you have to do both. It's just to give you exposure to both so that you really know what you're choosing and what's going to fit the way that you're going to be talking about your prevention plans a little bit better. So the theory of change is really about hypothesizing about the problem. A theory of change is trying to understand what is going on in your current system and why. And so it starts with that problem that needs fixing. As we just mentioned, we're thinking about children entering foster care and how we maybe try to avoid that and prevent that a little bit better. And it hypothesizes as to the root cause. Why is that happening? And by root cause, we don't mean like fundamentally, handed down by the fates or by gods as a reason. We're thinking about what is it about our system and the way that it interacts with families that sort of it perpetuates this fact that children come into the system. And then after you've sort of thought about the why, then that why actually leads very logically to the what you're going to do that's different, right? Given that this is the reason that this keeps happening, this is the most natural solution to get to that. And these things, the importance of a theory of change is that it ensures the logic, right? It ensures that the problem is connected to your hypothesis as to why it's happening, and your strategies for improving the problem are connected in a very logical way to those root cause theories. I will tell you just for a moment, I read many PIPs and SIPs. So I will travel all over the country and read lots of states' PIPs. I travel throughout the state of California, read lots of SIPs. And I'll tell you that we have kind of an old bad practice in child welfare of being absolutely in love with strategies, but not really always connecting those strategies to the root cause of our problems. We just sort of really like new ideas and new change. And so we like shoot straight down the road without reflecting on whether this is going to be the solution that's really going to move the needle. And in order to slow us down and ensure that the strategies that we find do move the needle, that's why we do these processes of hypothesizing as to root cause. So there are many different examples for how you might do a theory of change. This one I really like because it's very simple. I observe that too many children are entering foster care, or too many African American children are entering foster care, or too many Native American children are entering foster care. I think it's because we don't have enough prevention partners. So I plan to increase the number of prevention partners that we have in our community, specifically in areas where we have a lot of children entering the foster care system, which I think will result in, improved service provision in the community for children living in those areas and a reduced entry into foster care. And so this is just an example of how you have these 4 statements really lead into a theory of change. But you'll notice that what I indicated in this intervention had to be connected both to the strategy that I chose and also moving the needle on the original outcome. We're going to practice with this a little bit. We're going to shake it up and have some fun. I want us to start on a really low level by thinking about something that you might be wanting to do in your personal life. Maybe you feel like you got too much road rage. Or maybe you're you're gaining weight during COVID. Whatever those things are, I want you to spend just a minute and a half using this model to try and work on a root cause theory for your issue. Excuse me, 1 sec. 1.5 minutes for you to do that, please. So once again, just as a reminder, you're using these 4 statements. You're thinking about a personal area for change, and you're working through sort of what is your observation about what is currently happening? Why do you think that is happening? What might you do to change that from happening again? And why? What is the ultimate result of that change? And I'm going to ask for a couple of volunteers. So I hope everybody, I don't see a lot of faces right now, but I hope everybody's participating in the activity, because I'd really like to have at least one example brought forward so that we can really pick it apart and see how it fits into these various pieces.
You want us to share one?
If you've already finished one, Diane, I was going to give everybody a little bit more time, but if you're already ready to rock and roll, I'd love to hear your example.
Well, it's really simple. So I observed that I don't walk my dogs enough.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's because I don't have enough time or it's too hot. And so I plan to get up earlier, which I think will result in having more time to walk the dogs.
That's great, Diane. Now, usually I scold people for having two root causes, right? So is it that it's you don't have enough time, or that it's too hot? But you just happen to find a strategy that will address both, right? If you get up earlier in the morning, it's both cooler and
Yes.
you have more time. So that's great. You've managed to find a single strategy to hit on 2 root causes. But I love that example. It was very good, and it had a perfect logical connection, right? What did Diane observe? She's not walking her dogs enough, right? And the evidence for that might be that the dogs are constantly staring at her and giving her a dirty look, or sitting by the door, or maybe she just has that nagging feeling, right, that she should probably be getting those pups out a little bit more. And then I think it's because she really is thinking deeply about what is it when I'm sort of seeing the dogs, and I know that I want to walk them, but I can't. And what is it that's really sort of keeping me back? Well, it might be that I just can't find the time. I need 10, 15 minutes at the very least, and I'm sitting around looking at the clock and there's not that time. Or, boy, outside just sounds like it's going to kill me, right? It's just going to melt me and the pup, and we're both going to be miserable. So she plans to get up earlier, right? So that she builds in that time window, but also perhaps the heat is a little bit less excruciating, which will result in, Diane, what do you think will that result in?
Walking the dogs more frequently.
That's right. Exactly right. So this is a very good theory of change for a personal avenue, right? And I want to just quickly tell you that theories of changes are really important. And I'm glad we're talking about pets today. So I have an opportunity to share my beautiful, now deceased pet, Bella. She was an older cat. She lived a long, very happy and very affectionate life. But let me just tell you a little bit about Bella. She was always friendly. She would go outside, meet the neighbors. She kind of became a neighborhood celebrity. And that was all great. But at some point, we started getting phone calls from the neighbors, right? There's a skinny, desperate cat in the front yard chasing me. Now, that's a really embarrassing phone call to receive, especially from multiple neighbors. Like, all of a sudden, you're the person with the skinny, desperate cat chasing people down the street. So I was like, yeah, she really has been losing weight. We maybe ignored it a little bit at first because she was getting older, and we thought, oh, people just change over their lifetime, pets too. And then I was like, okay, well, what else might be the cause? And I hypothesized that maybe she had some intestinal parasite, some worm or something, kind of eating her nutrition before she could really benefit it. So I go to the pet store, I'm getting the front line and the advantage, whatever it is, right? And I'm just dosing this poor little kitty up. A couple months pass, I continue to get, hey, there's a really interesting skinny cat chasing me around. All right. So something's wrong with my theory of change, right? There was something wrong with my hypothesis as to what was causing Bella's weight loss, because she wasn't gaining the weight even once I was sort of dealing with whatever intestinal parasites I was imagining. That wasn't doing anything. And so my strategy wasn't effective. I wasn't moving the needle. We still had the behavior. We still had the annoying phone calls from my neighbors. So I finally took her to the doctor. Turned out she had a thyroid issue. She was hyperthyroid. So she was essentially burning through her nutrition faster than she could gain weight from it. Essentially, food was going in and out before it could even benefit her body or her weight. And so there was a very logical solution for that. There's a medication that you can give little kitties that slows down that metabolism so that they can then benefit more from the food that they're eating. I tell you this story because the root cause mattered. It mattered a heck of a lot. I could continue to give Bella all kinds of medications for intestinal parasites, and she would never, ever gain the weight, right? I would continue to receive those calls. And so I'm illustrating this because I want you to remember, my little kitty, when you're thinking about your system improvement in your county, today with around your prevention plans, tomorrow around your SIPs, next year around racial equity, right? The root cause is really important. It's absolutely critical to making sure that the strategy that you select is the one that's going to make the difference, right? Because otherwise we might do a lot of good in our system, or we might help certain people, but we had the problem that we're actually trying to target for improvement. And that's where we got to keep that focus, keep that strategies focused on there so that we can actually move the needle. So we're going to repeat the exercise, but this time I do want each of you to try it on your prevention plan. So I gave you an example of some language that you might use in terms of the problem that we're solving with prevention. I named it as children entering foster care. There are too many children entering foster care. You could say, I observe that there are too many children entering foster care. If you don't want to use that language, you can think about your prevention plan in a somewhat different way, right? You might reconceptualize it to there's a disproportionate number of Black children entering foster care, if you wanted to make that your problem. We know from our August 16th session that you can go really big prevention, big P prevention or little p prevention, whatever it is, tertiary, secondary, or primary that you're thinking about right now. Try and put that in terms of a problem to be solved, and then hypothesize as to the reason that problems exist, and then come up with some idea or statement of an intervention or a change in your current practice that is going to move the needle on that problem. And this time I'm going to give you 2 minutes because it's a little bit harder for us to go back into that workspace and think through a theory of change, but take about 2 minutes to try and conceptualize a problem related to prevention. Why is that problem exist? What might you do through a prevention plan to solve that problem? And then give me a statement of what it will look like when the problem is no longer present. And Diana was such a good volunteer earlier that I'm going to insist that somebody else from a different county be a volunteer for the second example. So I hope somebody's feeling brave and generous and is going to offer to share their example.
All right, Wendy, I'll give an example for you because it's one that I just put into effect last week. So awesome. I observed that I am sitting way too much and not getting up and not moving. And I think this is because meetings go back to back to back in mostly the virtual world now with no time for any breaks. So what I am implementing is making sure that meetings scheduled are, instead of 60 minutes or 30 minutes, dropping them down to be 50 minutes or 25 minutes, which I think will result in moving more, being able to move, take a break, stretch, and not having spent the whole day sitting, and then have some work time as well.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. That's a great example. Let's pick it apart a little bit. And I see you, Jeanette. I hope you're going to bring to me a prevention example in just a second. I'll be with you. Otherwise, you might have a question. So Wendy observes that she's sitting too much. She hypothesizes it's because she's never out of a meeting. I feel your pain, Wendy. I really do. So she took a really innovative strategy, which I think makes a lot of sense. Just cut those meeting back by 10 minutes so that we have that little bit of wiggle room right there. She believes that that will result in her moving more. Now, what if the problem is also that you have too much to do in addition to meetings, Wendy? Would it possibly be true that in that 10 minutes you would sneak in 3 or 4 emails? You certainly,
Absolutely, yes.
yeah, you certainly would. And that doesn't mean that your theory of change is wrong. I think that this is a very solid, very logical theory of change. I'm just pointing out the ways that when you are identifying the root cause, some of the times that root cause might also need a little bit of interrogation, right? And this is, you know, I'm not going to pick apart your sitting situation, but when we're doing this for prevention, would just apply that extra critical lens. What if there's other stuff going on or other things that are sort of intermeshed or intersecting with that also the back-to-back? And that's why I brought up, okay, I'm absolutely certain that you probably have plenty of evidence that you have that back-to-back meeting, but you might also have a pile of emails that you have on top of that work, right? Both of those are contributing. And so both may need a little bit of addressing into your interventions. And so maybe you might enhance your interventions. Meetings are 50 minutes, and you're only allowed to use the extra 10 minutes for email twice a day, right? Just to keep you honest to yourself about your intentionality with that change, right? Really sticking with, you know, I really want that time back so that I can move my body, go get some water, right? And sort of shake it out. So just really another wonderful example. Thank you so much. Jeanette, what's on your mind?
Let me turn my camera on so you can see me. No, I was thinking of a prevention theory of change. So I observed that there's been a significant increase in older children coming into foster care. And I think that's because of a lot of things, but all that families aren't getting services soon enough. So I plan to implement a program that provides services specific to that age group, which I think will result in less children entering foster care, less older children entering foster care.
That's great, Jeanette, and I love it because it's very targeted too. I like the fact that your example really illustrates that when you describe a problem, the problem can be super, super big, or you can use your data to hone in on a specific target population, right? And what you've identified as a target population is older youth. And I don't know whether that's 15 plus or that's 12 plus, whatever that is, you have an idea in mind of what that target population is, and you're starting to think about both that target population and the reasons why are also specific to that target population. Perhaps it struggles with a child behavior, right? Parents getting stressed out, or it might be substance use or something like that, right? And so then your strategy is that that you're going to introduce a number of services that are going to be introduced. Now, the one thing that I wanted to ask you about is it says soon enough, right? You said families are not getting services soon enough. So is it your idea that these older youth have touched on our system in the past and they didn't get the services, or what is the soonness?
Yeah, I could probably like delineate this problem further of that. We've seen an increase in relinquishments from adoptions and or guardianships, especially over the pandemic. I think that's probably one of the huge contributing factors is that that's increased a lot of challenges for our youth and mental health issues. And so I believe our parents are doing the best they can, but they do it the best they can until they can't do it anymore.
That's
and
right.
then they come to us and say, take them, I can't handle them anymore. So the idea is to get to them before we get to the take them, I can't handle them anymore stage, because sometimes at that point you've crossed the bridge that you can't go back over.
That's right.
So it's to use either the service providers that already help these youth when there's a challenge already, to help them do assessments sooner so that the families get help with what they need instead of getting to their breaking point and then the kid ends up in foster care.
That's right. So I'm going to just restate your theory of change a little bit to really hone in on this, because the other thing that I like is that, you know, adoptions and guardianships at risk of disruption is an identified category for prevention under FIPSA, right? So this is very, very good fit for FIPSA. So I observed that there's an increase in dissolving adoptions and guardianships. I think it's because families that have these relationships are not getting services soon enough, particularly for their older youth. So I plan to implement some services in the community that will help these types of families with issues that are specific to older young people, which should result in fewer dissolved adoptions and guardianships, right? So this is a wonderful theory of change, really logical, really good fit for FIPSA. So I think that we've seen really good examples of theories of change. I'm going to move on now a little bit, guys, so that we can finish up and understand the difference between theories of change and a logic model. So theories of change, as we just saw, is very high level, right? It's actually about what is the problem at its most basic level, and what do we need to do to solve that problem. And so this is effective for program planning. It's very high level. It thinks about those external influences outside of your agency, and it may include multiple pathways to change. A logic model is actually, once you've selected an intervention, it's more about laying down the tracks of exactly what that intervention is, what it's going to look like, what is it bringing to the table in order to solve that problem. So it's actually often follows a theory of change, because the theory of change helps us choose a strategy, and then the logic model tells us exactly what that strategy looks like. Okay, it's actually very, very focused on the intervention or the program level, where it's the instructions for how they do the work, right? It's limited to those resources that are happening within the program. And it actually, all of the metrics or the process measures in a logic model are very specific activities, things that we're doing to change the outcome. So here's a structure of a logic model. It again starts with the problem statement. It talks about what you're bringing to bear, right? What are the inputs? We're going to have this prevention agency do these types of activities with these resources, right? This section right here can be about what you inside your agency are doing, or what you are going to insist or enhance your outside providers in creating. So we need to understand what they're bringing to bear. The inputs is everything from staff to programs to the types of services that people are going to get, to sort of like resources that we might give to parents while they're in those programs. The activities and strategies are basically like, what does it look like for the parent or the child, right? Do they go somewhere? What do they do when they're there? How long are those services happening? And what are the specific services that they're receiving? The outputs is the sort of more proximate direct outcome of what happens in the program. I call it sometimes butts and chairs, right? Your outputs are literally exactly how many people are going to be where and when, and how is that an increase or a decrease from what we're currently seeing. That's different somewhat than outcomes. The outcomes is probably fewer children entering foster care. Okay, that's the ultimate goal in Jeanette's example, but also the one that I started us out with. The impact is usually a sort of more well-being statement of what that means to the family, right? So if we develop if we have this problem that older youth in adoptions and guardianships are entering foster care. So we're going to create some type of prevention agency that provides enhanced supports to caregivers through support groups, and to youth through mental health and behavioral supports, multidisciplinary teams, perhaps, all these things happening in here. The outputs is, go ahead.
Wendy, I just want to let you know that we had the 2-minute warning.
Already? Okay, my
Yeah.
goodness. Okay, very good. Thank you, Dana. The outcomes are going to be that then fewer children are going to be entering foster care because they're going to go into those programs and receive those services. The impact is going to be, you know, greater family togetherness, less trauma for children, right, and less of that sort of time spent in foster care and that disconnection from family. All right, so just so that you understand, the logic model is a series of if-then statements. If we have the resources, then we can accomplish the activities. If we accomplish the activities, it's going to look like this. This number of people are going to be served, or these many people are going to do these types of things, which is going to accomplish these outcomes, which is going to benefit children in this particular way. That's essentially the structure of a logic model, is thinking, if I have this, then this can happen. And if that happens, then we'll see this. And if that happens, we'll see that. Okay, so that's essentially the structure of a logic model. And I just wanted to show you one final, before you go, example. A logic models often come to us from our public health neighbors. And so we have patients in a hospital setting are experiencing preventable infections. And so they have nurses, doctors, and soap, right, as their inputs. Those are their resources. They're going to insist that personnel wash their hands according to a standardized protocol. They're going to announce that protocol at every sink, right, provide the soap. The output, a direct output of that, is just they're going to have a greater number of people washing their hands. It's as simple as that. The outputs are like the direct output of the program, but the outcome should be a reduction in the number of infections. And enhanced client health is ultimately the impact of that overall change. So that's an example of a logic model, and we did an example together of a theory of change. And so I wish you luck going into the next sessions, and folks that are coming in here to the main session may